Hello everyone, my name is Kumar and welcome back to our channel Kumar Programming. This is the sixth part of Docker series where we are going to learn about Docker Compose. And in this video, we are going to learn everything that you need to know about the Docker Compose along with the practical demonstration. We have covered so far Docker introduction, Docker setup, Docker architecture, Dockerfile, Docker images and Docker containers. In our previous video, we have covered our Docker commands as well. Now we are going to move with the Docker Compose. That is nothing, that is a combining the multiple container all together. Okay, now let's move and see what all the things that we are going to cover inside our Docker Compose. Inside our Docker Compose, we will understand what is Docker Compose and why we use it. After that, we will install our Docker Compose plugin, and further we are going to write our Docker Compose file. That is nothing, that is a YAML file, right? We will learn more about YAML file later on in this video, and further we are going to learn about how to define our services, networks and volumes. And further we will learn about all the useful commands for the Docker Compose. And then after that, we would be running our multiple container or multiple apps in our Docker Compose. And eventually, we are going to learn how we can debug our container from Visual Studio. Alright, so now let's start. Now let's flip to the Visual Studio. Here in our Docker project, I have created a README file where I have provided all the required details and commands for your reference, and also this complete project is pushed to the GitHub repository. If you want, you can take the reference from it. Now further, let's understand that what is Docker Compose. Docker Compose is a tool for defining and running multiple container in a Docker application, right? So here what I can say, Docker Compose is a tool which is used to create a Docker application. So here suppose that this is my Docker application and it create the multiple container inside the Docker application, right? So here this is my Docker application, Docker app, right? And this create multiple container inside this Docker application. So here I'm going to create multiple container. So suppose that this is my container 1, this is my container 2, this is my container 3. We can have so many containers over here. So these all are containers, or also we can say them as a services, right? So these all are containers. We can say as a containers, we can say as a apps, we can say also as a services, right? And it use YAML file to configure the application services. And how these services are being configured inside this application by using a file name as a Docker Compose file, right? And here it create a Docker Compose file inside our project. And this Docker Compose file is having list of all the services, right? Whatever the services that you are seeing here, or whatever the container that you are seeing here, like we have 4 container, 1, 2, 3, 4. So here we have defined 4 services in our YAML file. And this is nothing, this is our Docker Compose YAML file. Okay, so this is our docker-compose.yaml file. Okay, if you don't know about the YAML file, don't worry, it's very easy. That I'll tell you that how we can write our YAML file very easily, right? And YAML stands for yet another markup language. Yet another markup language. Okay, so YAML stands for yet another markup language. It means YAML is used for the data representation. It's not a markup language. Most of the configuration that earlier we were giving inside our JSON file, but now most of the services like Kubernetes, Docker, they are using YAML file for our configuration, for the data representation, and this YAML file is responsible to start and stop all these containers. And also these containers needs to communicate with each other. So it create the network, So by using this network, sharing network, these containers can, or these services can talk to each other. Okay. And now it also create the volume. So volume is basically, suppose that this container is my database container, right? So this container is my DB container, okay? And we have some of the data here, right? And after some time, this container got crashed. And then in that particular case, we won't be having our data if it's not persist, right? So what it does, it create a volume, right? And store all the data inside this volume, right? And we associate this volume, we mount this volume to this container, and this volume can be shared with any other containers. Okay, so this volume is shareable. And also if this container got crashed and we are creating a new container, and the new container is going to reference this volume data, so this data is going to be persist by using our volume. Okay, so this is a very high level overview of the Docker Compose. If it's not getting clear to you as of now, don't worry, it would be getting clear once we'll have our practical demonstration. Alright, now we will see how to install this Docker Compose plugin. So Docker Compose plugin should be already installed once you have installed your Docker desktop, which we have already covered in one of our previous video in Docker installation and setup. However, if still it's not installed, then we can install it manually by using few commands which is provided on docs.docker.com, its official website. So let's open this website. So you can see here there are few commands are there which is going to download and install this Docker Compose plugin, right? So this is the command to download and install, and then after that this command is used to provide the permission, and finally we can verify our Docker Compose installation. So now let's quickly do that. So I'll copy these commands and let's go to our Visual Studio. Here I'll open my terminal and I'll paste all those commands. Let's make it bigger and press enter. Now it's downloading and installing in my local machine. It's got installed very quickly because I have already installed this Docker Compose plugin. Now we can provide the execute permission by using this command. Press enter. So our Docker Compose plugin is installed. Now we can verify. We can verify by using Docker Compose version command. Okay, Docker Compose version. So you can see as of now my Docker Compose version is 2.27.0, right? And also we can write command as a docker -compose -version. So it's going to give you the same result. Okay, so these two commands are same. And also we can verify in our one of docker command as a docker info. If you remember that, we have already covered in our previous video. Docker info. Now here see, this is my client and here we are having our plugins, and these are all the plugins installed. And here you can see we have our Docker Compose plugin, which version is 2.27.0. Alright, so friends, I hope everything is clear so far. Now further move and create our first Docker Compose YAML file. So I'm going to create my first Docker Compose file here at the root directory outside of all these projects. So here I'll create a Docker Compose.yaml file. So basically you can create your Docker Compose YAML file by two ways. Either you can create it manually or you can create it by using our docker init command. Okay, so here we can use our docker init command. Docker init, right? So once you press enter, it's going to ask you for which project you are going to create your Docker files, right? So I'm going to select here other options. Now if you see here, few files are created. One is docker ignore. So one file is created as a docker ignore where all these files will be ignored once we will have our deployment. And here as of now this docker file is not needed at all, so we will delete it. And this docker readme md file was created. As of now it's not needed, so we'll remove this file as well. And here we have Docker Compose YAML file. So for now I'll remove everything from here and we will create it from scratch. Okay, so just for the simplicity I'll remove this docker ignore file as well. Okay, so here we have our Docker Compose YAML file now, and if you want to do it manually, you can do it manually as well. So I'll just delete this file and I'll create one more file here, compose.yaml, right? Very simple. Now let's understand that what this YAML file is. Okay, so YAML stands for yet another markup language. It means it represents the data. Okay, it's not a markup language like HTML, XML. Those are the markup languages, but this YAML is not a markup language. It is used for the data representation. and you would be knowing about the JSON, right? JSON format, JavaScript object notation. Now let me show you quickly that what is the difference between JSON and YAML file. So I'll just type convert JSON to YAML. Okay. I hope that you are aware about the JSON file. Now let's see what is the differences we have in JSON and YAML, right? So here, if you see in JSON, we have curly bracket. Everything is wrapped inside the curly bracket. But here we don't have any curly bracket, right? So if you see here JSON, right? The property name here as a JSON, and it's having an array and it's having two value, right? So whenever we are having an array, we have to give as a hyphen and then value. So this is the collection. So JSON is a collection of rigid and better for data interchange, right? YAML, here you see this is the collection, slim and flexible, better for configuration. And here YAML, if you see slim and flexible, so this is the collection. Whenever we have the collection, we have to be write hyphen and then array value. Okay. And whenever we have any object, right? So we can straightforward, we can write our key and values. Okay. And whenever we have a paragraph and we have multiple line, we can write in this way. If you write here as a paragraph in a multiple line, so it will consider as a multiple line. But in JSON, we have to be give as a line break here. Okay. And this YAML is widely being used in Docker, in Kubernetes, and in our cloud environment. Okay. And the most important thing that I'll tell you that this YAML file supports the entire JSON. If I copy this entire JSON and I paste it over here, still it's a valid YAML file, right? So YAML file completely support for the JSON data. Now let me revert it back. So refresh it. Now this is my YAML file, right? So it's very easy, isn't it? So I hope that now you have understood about the YAML file. Now let's flip to the Visual Studio. So now let's start to write our services in our compose file. So if you remember that in our previous session, I have created 3 applications, right? One in Node, one in HTML, and one in Angular, right? And separately we have built those applications and we have executed as a container. But now these 3 applications are going to be combined inside this Docker Compose file and running all those services as a container inside Docker Compose. So now let's see how we can do that. So here, first of all, we have to write services. And services is the topmost tag we have, and inside the services then we have to press tab and we have to provide our service name. So as of now, first of all, I'm going to create for node app EC2. So here I'll just give as a node app, right? This could be my service name. Now here inside our node app service, we will give one indent, one space, and then after that we will give our image name. Okay, so let's see here, image, and image name we will give as a same name. Okay, node app, and then I'll give the tag as a latest. So it's not mandatory to give the same name. You can give any name over here. Here just for the simplicity, I have given the same name as service, right? Once our image is ready, then we have to build this image, right? So we have a property as a build, and inside build we have to give the path, right? So here if you press dot, it means our Docker file is there right there in the project, right? But our Docker file is there inside our node app EC2 project, right? See here inside node app EC2 project, here we have Docker file, right? So we cannot give it directly here. So now I'll press enter, I'll give one indent here, right? And then we have to give context, and inside this context we will provide the path for our Docker file. So our path for our Docker file is node app EC2, right? And inside this node app EC2 we have our Docker file. And along with the context, we will give target. Target is nothing. Target is defined in our Docker file for production, for debug, for development environment. Okay, so now let's see where we define our target in Docker file. So if you see here, this is my Docker file, and here from I would define as a target as, let's define as a debug. And the second I will define as a production. Okay, prod. So once I'll define here target as a debug, then it's going to pick only this section. Okay, and once I'll define my target as a prod here, then it's going to pick this section, right? Because in production might be some of the configuration needs to be different. We don't want to debug in our production. So on the basis of this target, we can build our image here. So here I'll give for debug. Okay, Great. Once we have created our image and we have built our image, then we have to generate the container from build image, right? So let's, here we will give the container name that we will give as a node hyphen app. We will give the same name as we have the service. And now once our container is ready, then we have to run this container on a port, right? So let's provide the port here, ports, and ports should be an array. So here we will give port inside the array. So this is an array, so that's why it's given started with a hyphen. Okay, so here we will give port as a 8080, and inside the Docker on TCP port it would be 8080. If you see here inside our Docker file, this is exposed at 8080, right? And here we can provide multiple port, right? So I'll provide one more port here that is specifically used for debugging. So that port is 9229 and 9229. Okay, we will discuss more about this port once we will try to debug our container from our Visual Studio, right? So, and also in case of any error comes, suppose that our container got crashed, so we have to restart. Okay, so restart, and we will give as a always. Okay, so this is the minimum requirement that we need to start a service, to run a container inside our Docker Compose, right? So now let's quickly build this and see if this our service is working fine inside our Docker Compose. So let's open our terminal, Control J, and here we will build our this Docker Compose file. So it's very simple command here, Docker Compose build. Don't worry, I'm going to explain about all the Docker Compose commands later on in this video, but here we will see couple of commands to build and run our entire Docker Compose file. Okay, so here simply we will Docker Compose build. Okay, and it's going to, because our Docker Compose file inside this Docker repository, so it's going to find this Docker Compose file here, and it's going to build whatever the services are there here. So we have node app service here. So this, once it will come to the node app, it's going to find the Docker file inside the node app, right? And this is going to build the entire image for node app. So now you can see here my image has been built, right? So once each image is built, we can see, we can verify it from here. We know how to verify our images, Docker images. Okay, so once we press that, we can see here we have one image is created, right? Now we have to run this image, right? So we have option as a Docker Compose up. Okay, Compose up -d. I'll give as a -d because our terminal will be in detached mode, so our terminal will be free. So now see, our container got created here, and we can verify here. Now we know how to verify our container, like Docker PS, right? So in Docker PS, we would be able to see one of our container is running over here. Now let's verify in the Docker desktop as well. So if you see here in the Docker desktop, we have created an image as a node app, right? And if you see the container, here is the magic. So if you see the container, there is an application created as a Docker. So if you see here, this is a directory which we have at Docker, and inside Docker, we have created one application, one service, and one container. You can say anything, but here inside our Docker Compose, we say as a Docker service. So we created as a Docker service over here, right? And it's running on port 8080. We can verify this. Yep, see, our application is running on 8080 port. Great. So far, so good. As of now, if you see here inside our Docker Compose, we are running only one service, right? But here we are required to create multiple services. So how we can do that? Let's see. So inside our Visual Studio, here we will create another service for HTML application and Angular application. Okay. So here I'll just copy the entire thing and then I'll paste it here at this place, because this place is this indentation is for our service, right? So here we will give one more app as a HTML app. Okay, and here we will give the image name as a HTML app, and this is the path would be Docker HTML app, Docker HTML app. Okay, and here we will give container name as a HTML app, and I'll remove this port, and this port should be running outside of the container at 8081, and internally it is exposed at 8080. If you see here, this was exposed at 8080, right? So our this service is ready. Now we will write for the Angular application as well. So I'll copy this and I'll paste it over here. Okay, so now here I'll write for ng app, and here I'll give for ng app latest image name, and then inside the build, and this would be the Docker Angular app. See, this is the repository name, directory name, right? And we will do target as a debug. So as of now, we will remove this because we don't have target as a debug here. And inside this also, we don't have target any debug, as we don't have any debug target, right? Here we will give ng app, and for Angular application, I remember that it's running on default port 4200. So we'll give as a 4200 port here. Okay. See here, it's giving error because it's not at the right place, so I'll put it here. Now if you see, the error gone because it is having now right indentation. Okay, now we have written, if you see, let me make it a bit smaller. Yeah, so now if you see, inside our services we have created three service, one for the node app, one for the HTML app, and one for the ng app. And if you copy this entire thing, and if you come here and convert JSON to YAML, and if we put here our YAML file, so it's going to quickly convert into the JSON file. See here, inside our service we have node app service, right? And node app service is having image and then build and then container name, and we are having a port as array, right? And we have given property as a restart always. Similarly, we have another service as HTML app and ng app, right? So it's very easy to provide the configuration in our YAML because it's very light and it's very easy to configure. Now let's see, we are going to build all these three services all together. So here I'll open my terminal, and here let's make clear. And what I'll do here, so here first of all I'm going to run the command as a docker compose build, right? So docker compose build is going to build all the services which are available inside our docker compose file. So here docker compose, I'm saying we can give the name as a compose file, or we can give the name as a docker-compose file. Okay, both are same. So here I'll build all the services inside our compose file. So we have command as a docker compose build. Okay, so it's going to build all the images from the services configured, right? So see here, now our HTML app is getting built. It will take some time to build because it's building first time. And here you can see all the steps are getting executed. This is the first out of 3 steps, and then this is the second out of 3 steps, and then this is the third one, right? And now if you see here, our image got ready. Okay, first step is still in progress. It's transferring the context, right? So you can see here still it's in progress. It may take some time, depends upon your system configuration. And here you can see this node app also getting built, and it's already built and image got created. Now it will do for the Docker Angular app. Now if you see here, my Angular application is also getting built. Okay, and here image got created. So we have built our entire services which are provided inside our Docker Compose file. Now we can run clear. Now here we can run all those services, and if you want to verify, here we can verify as a Docker images, right? So we will be able to see that all those 3 images which was created by Docker Compose file. Now we need to run all those 3 images inside our Docker Compose as a service, as a container, right? So here we know that we have command as a Docker compose up, right? And -d. -d is just for detached mode. So our terminal, this terminal will be detached from the container, and our terminal will be free from the container. Okay, and if you want to give the this -d, then our container will be attached to the terminal and we won't be able to do anything further. Okay, so now let's press enter. So this command is going to execute all those images which are available inside our Docker Compose. So see, now all services are up and running. Okay, great. Now let's see in our Docker Compose here. Yeah, see, this is my Docker Compose as a Docker application here, and all those 3 services are running inside Docker Compose. So the benefit of this Docker Compose application, what we can do, suppose that here we have more than 20-25 services running inside our Docker Compose. So we can quickly stop all those services. See here, I can quickly stop all those services, and it will take just few seconds to stop my all the services, right? It's quite fast. See now, as of now, my all services are getting stopped. And if we want to start all the services, we can quickly start all those services, and within a couple of seconds, my all the services are going to be started. See, my all the services are started. And we can verify also, this is my Angular app, and this is my HTML app, and this is my Node app. So let's verify everything here. So see, this is my node app is running on 8080 port, and this is my HTML app which is running on 8081 port, and here my Angular app which is running on 424200 port, right? So it's very interesting, isn't it? So friends, I hope that everything is getting clear so far. Now further, let's move and create some of the database services like MongoDB and Redis, and then connect our front-end application with our Mongo database. So we will learn how these applications can communicate with each other and how we can create the network and volumes for our services, right? So let's do that. So now here we are going to use our MongoDB database service, right? So here I have already provided the configuration for MongoDB here. See, writing Docker for running multiple apps, right? So here we have MongoDB. So I'll copy this, and I've already provided this entire code to my GitHub. So you can take the reference from there. I'll copy this quickly so it will save my time, and I'll put it here. Okay. So here we have MongoDB, our service, and the image name is Mongo latest, right? And the container name that we have given as a MongoDB, and host name also I have given a MongoDB, and MongoDB default port, right? And the volume here, I'll tell you that about volume and network as well. So this is the named volume we have, Mongo data, and we have configured this to our data DB folder, okay? Because our data is getting stored over here. So we have created a volume at MongoDB data, okay? And here the network that we have created as a default network, okay? So all those services, we will add this network to all those services. So all those services will communicate with each other by using this default network, right? So if we have our MongoDB, we should be having our Mongo Express as well in order to see our data in MongoDB. So let's add the service for Mongo Express as well. For Mongo Express, here we have as a Mongo Express. So I'll use this, right? So similarly here I have given image name as Mongo Express and container name as a Mongo Express, and it's running on a port 8082, and the TCP port inside our Docker is 8081, and here we are putting as a environment variable config as a MongoDB server as a MongoDB, and the default port which we have provided for MongoDB is 27017, right? So here we have 27017, and this Mongo Express is depends on this MongoDB because it's using this MongoDB data. So we have given here depends on, right? And the network we have added as a default network, okay? So these two services can communicate with each other by using this default network. Now I'm using the Redis as well, so I'll use for Redis. So here I have for Redis configuration, so I'll using this Redis and Redis commander, both I'll use it together, okay? So here this is for my Redis. Let's see this. So in Redis also similarly we have given a image name as a Redis, host name as a Redis, container name also as a Redis, restart always, port name by default Redis is configured on 6379 port, and volume we have given as a Redis data. This is the named volume as a Redis data, and the data is getting stored inside our data folder, right? And network we are using as a default network. And similarly we have taken the service for the Redis commander, and this Redis commander is nothing, this is the just an UI because this Redis and MongoDB are the database, right? We cannot see it actually. So in order to see all the data stored inside the database and Redis, for Mongo we are using Mongo Express, and for Redis we are using Redis commander, right? Container name as a Redis commander, restart always, and parameter that we are passing here Redis host, okay? Host that we are passing, which host it is running, right? So if you see here host.docker.internal, this is very important. If we want to access our Docker host, right, here we can use our port 0000 also, but here we are going to give the host name as a host.docker.internal. On this host we are going to use our Redis service which is running on 6379 port, okay? And port by default port I have given as a 8081, and network that we have as a default network, right? And now it's time to configure our network and volumes, right? Because we have given here, if you see here, we have given named volume as a Redis data, and here we have given as a network as a default. So now we will configure our network and volume. So see, here we have volume and network, right? So here come to our Docker compose file, and here these two, volume and network, would be there at the service level, services, right? So see here, this is the services, and these services are going to use these volumes. So these volumes are the shareable volume, and these network is the shareable network, and these volume can be used by any of the service, and these network can be used by any of the services which are intended to talk to each other. Okay, good. Now let's see here, we have one error because see, I mean, like, it's not in a proper indentation, so we'll give a proper indentation. Hopefully this should be resolved. Okay, great. So now we have all the services here. Now let's review our all the services here. So first service is node app, and it looks fine. Build and container name, and here we have port 8080 since it is running on 8080 default port. Okay, now here if you see, here we have exposed 8080, and here also we have exposed 8080. So here we will give as a 8081 because this is our HTML application. Now this is default port 4200. It looks good, and MongoDB, it's going to run on 27017, and Mongo Express is going to run on 8081. Here we have given 8082, so it's fine. And the Redis is running on 6379, and here our Redis commander is going to execute on 8083, right? Because already we have used 8081 and already we have used 8082 as well, right? So we are going to use 8083. And here we have volume, our MongoDB data and Redis data. So you can see here in the volume, I have given as a named volume as a Redis data. Here we have to define inside our volume, and MongoDB data is given inside our Mongo, right? MongoDB. See here we have MongoDB data. We have defined our volume. And network, this network default network is associated with all the services. Network. So here we have not associated the network. Let's associate our network default. Copy this and paste it here. Okay, now hopefully it should be fine. Yeah, it should be in HTML app as well, right? And we should give inside our node application. Yeah, hopefully everything is fine now. Now let's quickly build our Docker Compose file. So we will open terminal here, Control J. So in order to build our Docker Compose file, we have a command as a Docker Compose build, right? So I have given a here, so it's misspelled, Docker Compose build. Okay, so it's going to build our Angular application and our HTML application as well as our node application, right? But the other three services which we have, Redis Commander, and MongoDB and MongoDB Express, that is going to be pulled from our Docker Hub. So that is going to be executed by Docker Compose up command. So let's first build our all these three services, and then after that we will execute our Docker Compose up command. Okay, so it may take some time, depend upon your machine configuration as well as network. So here you can see, first of all, initially it's taking HTML app. So all the steps are completed from the HTML app Docker file, and here image is ready. Okay, now it is doing for the node application, and for the node application also image is ready. Now it should be doing for our Angular application. It's picking from the cache because already we have built it earlier. Now if you see here, it's got completed for our Angular application as well, right? Now we will run our command, make it clear first, and now we will run our Docker Compose up command. So Docker Compose up -d. Okay, so this command is going to pull all those services from our Docker Hub, like Redis Commander, MongoDB, Mongo Express. These all are not in our local system, so these services are going to pull from Docker Hub, and it will take some time. And here you can see the progress. See here, the green dots are showing the progress for the Redis Commander and MongoDB. This is the progress for MongoDB, and Mongo Express is not it started, and Redis is also not it started. So these files are getting pulled in chunk. See, these all are the chunks actually. As of now, it's only pulling for 2 images, and now MongoDB got started. See here, now it's got started, and Redis is still pending. Now you can see here Redis Commander is pulled completely. MongoDB, Mongo Express, and Redis is still waiting. So that's the beauty of our Docker. So we have to just pull all those services and make the container inside our Docker and use inside our application. So we are not required to install MongoDB, Redis, Mongo Express, anything in our local machine. We have to just pull the image in our Docker and make it as a container and we can use in our application. So that's what we are doing as of now. So Mongo Express also pulled and Redis is also got pulled and MongoDB is still in progress. Let's wait for some more time. So now you can see my all those images are downloaded and now it's creating the volume. So two volumes are created, MongoDB data and Redis data, right? And these all our containers are getting started and running. So now you can see here my Redis container got started, my MongoDB got started, and ng was already running, and Redis also got started, HTML web app also got started, and Node app also it's also running, and Mongo Express also got started. Okay, so now let's verify all these services here, right? So if you see here in our Docker desktop, all those services are up and running, and all those running inside our Docker application, Docker Compose application, right? So see, and now I can stop all those services very easily, right? And I can manage all those services very easily inside our Docker Compose. So now let's first of all verify if all of our services are up and running. So here 4200, our Angular application is running, and here our Node app, and here we have our Redis, and here we have our HTML app, and here we have MongoDB, and here we have Redis commander, and here we have Mongo Express. Okay, so yeah, Mongo Express is asking for user ID and password. So here we have user ID as an admin and password as a PASS. Okay, that is the default password we have for Mongo Express. Let's sign in and let's see. So here our Angular application is running on 4200 and our Node application on running on 80 port. This is not running. Okay, yeah. So this is 6379. That is Redis. So we cannot see our Redis data. So we have to use our Redis commander. And here you can see this is our HTML application running on 8081 port, and this is our MongoDB, right? So MongoDB is running on 27017 port, and here you have Redis commander, right? So Redis commander, if you see, Redis commander is connected to our host docker.internal, and here whatever the data is going we are storing inside the Redis, we will be able to see over here. And this is our Mongo Express, right? So here whatever the data is going to be stored inside our Mongo database, we are going to see over here, right? So all of our services up and running, and it's working all together, right? It's amazing. So far we have learned a lot and we are doing a very good progress now, and hopefully you would be learning very well and everything should be clear so far. Now further we are going to use this Node app. This is our API, and we are going to use this Redis inside our Node app, and also we are going to use MongoDB inside our Node app. Okay, and then after that, once we will use our database inside our API, then this Angular application is going to use this Node app API and call our database and Redis by using our API and showing the data in our Angular application. That's what our whole purpose is, right? These all the services should communicate with each other. So now let's quickly do that. And here we will quickly build our API inside our Node app EC2 for the server.js file. Since already we are running our server here, but we are going to do the changes in order to communicate with our Redis and MongoDB database. So here I have already provided the code. So quickly I'm going to use this. So mainly I'm not focusing to create an API, right? I'm trying to focus how we can create the services and how those services are communicating with each other, right? That's the whole purpose of this video. So I'm going to copy this entire code and I'll paste it over here in my server.js file, right? Now let me quickly explain you. Here we are using the Express, Node Express, right? And here we are using the Mongoose library that is used to connect with the Mongo database. And here we are using IO-Redis, right? IO-Redis is used to connect to the Redis database, right? And here we are going to create one model. So now let's quickly create a model as well. So now quickly we'll create a model. So inside our source folder, I'm going to create another folder here as a models. And here inside this, we are going to create a file as a user.js. user.js, and this would be the data model for our user collection. Now here I have created a model, right? So I'll copy this and I'll use in my user.js file. Okay, now paste it here. So our model is ready. Here we are using Mongoose in order to connect to our Mongo database, and here we are defining our schema inside our Mongoose, and then here we are creating our model mongoose.model. We are creating a user model here and passing the user schema, and finally we are exporting our user model over here, right? Now go back to our server.js file here. So here we have imported our user model, and we are using course because course is nothing. This is a cross origin resource sharing, because our Angular application is going to use the resources from our node application. So we have to provide this Angular application as a origin inside our middleware, right? Otherwise we will get a course error. And if you see, we have given a port here as I believe it was running on 8080 port, so it will be on 8080 port. Here we are giving the MongoDB connection, and here we are taking as a database as a user.db database. Okay, and this is the way that we are going to create a connection for Redis. I'll remove this, it's not needed because we are not using any password for Redis. And once this we are using for redis.on in order to get to know if Redis is connected successfully or not. And here we are trying to connect our Mongo database, mongoose.connect. If it's successfully connected, then it will show the message as a database connected successfully, right? And we were having these two endpoints since beginning, and this is the endpoints that we have created to save the data to the MongoDB database, right? And this is the endpoint to get the data from Mongo database, right? And then after that we have created a Redis save, and Redis save is used to, here we can give as a Mongo save. Okay, it would be more clear, MongoDB save. Okay, MongoDB save and MongoDB get. Okay, MongoDB get, right? This endpoint is to save the data to the Redis, and then further we have this Redis get endpoint is used to get the data from the Redis. Okay, and we are running this our server on port 8080, and here inside our Redis we are storing the key as a my key and value we are storing as a my value, right? So I have hard coded everything here, and then after that I'm trying to fetch the value for my key from our Redis get endpoint. Okay, and here inside our Mongo database I have given a hard coded user object over here, and then I'm trying to save this user inside our Mongo database. Okay, and the same that we are trying to find the list of all the users, right? Now hopefully this should be working fine. So now let's build it quickly, and we have to just run our Docker compose up. Okay, Docker in our terminal. Why my terminal is not working? Okay, I'll remove this terminal. I'll create one more terminal here as a git bash terminal. Now here we will build our Docker compose file, but before building we have to install all these dependency like Mongoose, IORedis and course, right? So here we will install, but we will install in our node app ECT application, right? So let's open an integrated terminal here. Now here we will do npm install Mongoose, and we have to install IORedis, and we have to install course. Okay, yep, these three dependency that we have as of now. So I'll install it. Now all these three dependencies are installed. Let's see in our package.json file. So in our package.json file, all four dependency express was already there. Now course, IORedis and Mongoose is installed now. Okay, now delete this terminal and expand it. Now we are going to build our Docker compose file, right? So here we have a command as a docker compose build, right? So it's going to build all the services, Docker HTML app, Docker Angular app, and Docker Node app, right? Rest all the other services like Redis Commander, MongoDB and MongoDB Express, that is going to be pulled from Docker Hub once we will run our Docker compose up command. Okay, because those are not in our local repository, right? So now it seems like everything is built successfully. Now we are going to run our Docker compose up command. So make it clear. And here we are going to run our Docker compose up -d. Okay, -d is the detached to the terminal from containers, right? See, now as of now, it's pulling our Redis commander, MongoDB, Mongo Express, and Redis from our Docker hub, because those images are not available in our local. We can pull all those images from Docker hub and run as a container in our Docker. and we can run all our services which are dependent on these images, right? And we are not required to install these software in our local machine. We just have to run our Docker and we can use all these services. So it may take some time. So these dots are showing like progress of downloading. So see, this is Express is going to be completed. Redis is already pulled. MongoDB and Redis is in progress for now. Now it's about to complete. Only MongoDB is pending. Right. So all those images are pulled. Now it's created our network. See, Docker default network is created, and here it's created a Docker Redis data volume, and this container HTML app, Redis commander, node app, ng app, MongoDB, and Mongo Express is started now. Okay. Now let's see in our Docker desktop. So here inside our container, see all of our containers are up and running. We can verify here our node app. Yep. So see here our server started at port 8080 and connected to Redis successfully, and database also connected successfully, right? Now we can test our endpoint. So this is running on port 8080. So we will go here and open this application on port 8080, right? So see here. So our first endpoint was MongoDB save, right? So we are going to save the data into the MongoDB. So what we will do, we will execute this endpoint here, MongoDB save, right? Now user saved, right? So this data got saved to the MongoDB database. Now let's try to fetch this data, MongoDB get, right? So hopefully we would be able to get the data from the MongoDB as well. See, now we got the data from MongoDB back. Okay. Now I will test for the Redis save, right? So here we will test for Redis save. Now Redis value set successfully updated for key my key. Okay. Now let's find out the value. So Redis get, right? See, from the Redis for the my key we have the value as a my value. So now our node application is connecting to the database, right, and fetching the data. So now if you see here this our node app is trying to connect with this MongoDB, right? And now our front end application, this Angular application, will connect to this node app to fetch the data from the MongoDB database, and we can see all those data in the Mongo Express. So now let's open our Mongo Express as well to show you the data, store data into the database in our Mongo Express. So this is the Mongo Express. Let's refresh this. Yep, UserDB. See, UserDB database is created over here, and if you want to view, you can view. See, one data is getting stored, right? Now let me call it once again our, it's not MongoDB save, what it is? It's a MongoDB save. Sorry, it's a MongoDB save. It's wrong actually, but we can use same here as a MongoDB save. So now the same user again got stored into the database, and if you see here in our Mongo Express, if you refresh this, we would be able to see the two records. And in the Redis commander also we have stored our Redis value. See here, if we refresh this, we got this my key and value is my value stored. Okay. Now we will try to connect our Node API with our Angular application. Now let's quickly go to our Angular application. Now here in our Angular application, we are going to create service. So I'll open another terminal here, open in integrated terminal. So this terminal will be integrated with this application only. Okay. So now here we are going to create a service, ng generate service inside our services folder, services, and then I'll give the service name, which is data. Okay. So this fetch data service is going to fetch the data from our API for the Redis as well as MongoDB. Okay. So now you can see here inside our source folder app, we have created a service as a fetch data service, right? Now here quickly we will write two methods as a fetch data and fetch Redis. Okay. So here fetch data, this method is going to fetch the data from MongoDB. Okay. And it's going to return an observable. Okay. Observable type of, as of now I'll give as a type of any. Okay. And this observable is imported from RxJS library. Okay. Now here I will write our function. So in order to fetch the data from endpoint, we should be using our HTTP. So I'll be using here private HTTP. I'll inject our HTTP library. So here private HTTP, that would be coming from HTTP client. Okay. HTTP client, right? And now here we can call this HTTP by using return this dot http dot get, right? And we will be getting data type of any here. Okay, and what URL we have to call here? We have to call URL as a, let me copy the URL from our Docker. So URL would be localhost 8080. So I'll be using this URL localhost 8080, and we have to give our endpoint to fetch the data. So in order to fetch the data, we have endpoint as, if you see here in our node application, we have MongoDB get. Okay, so I'll use this endpoint MongoDB get, right? And similarly, I'll write for Redis as well. So here Redis data, right? And here I'll use Redis get, right? So if you see here, we have for the Redis, we have a Redis get, right? So now this is going to return an observable. Now Control A, Control KF. So now our service is ready to fetch the data from MongoDB as well as Redis. Now our service is ready, and now we will be using this service and fetching the data from MongoDB and Redis inside our app component. Okay, so inside our component, I'm going to use this piece of code. So here title is not needed at all, but anyway, let it be. And here I'm going to use as a user details and Redis data, two variables, and inside here I'll use my fetch data service, right? And ng on init, I'm calling from fetch data service to this fetch data and subscribing the data, and the data is getting stored inside our user details, right? And here we have let's make it as a Redis data. Okay, and now this data is getting stored inside our Redis data. Okay, now we will show all these two information inside our app component HTML page. So here I'll quickly remove all those things from here, that's not needed at all, right? And here I'll show this detail which we have fetched from our API. Okay, so here I'm going to display. So here I'm using ULLI, and inside this UL I'm trying to show this information which we have received from the user details data, right? And now I'm going to show you the details in the h1 tag for our Redis as well. So we are getting a Redis value from there, so we will just use this variable name here, Redis data, right? So I'll give this Redis data over here, and this ng-for is not imported, so let's import it quickly here inside our router outlet. So inside our import, here we will import our common module. Okay, see here we have used our HTTP client, so we have to import our HTTP client here in our main.ts file. So here in our app config, so we have to add our provider. In Angular 17 we have to add provider in our app config file. So here we have our providers list, and here we have to provide our, we have a method here as a provide HTTP client, provide HTTP client. Yeah, here we go. Now in this way we can add our HTTP client inside our provider in Angular 17, right? So hopefully everything should be working fine. So first of all, let me run in our local and let's see. So what I'll do quickly, in our Docker Compose, I will go and I'll just stop my Angular application from here. Okay, and then I'll come back here and I'm going to run this from local machine. Okay, ng serve. If it's working fine locally, then we will build it in our Docker. So it's building in local now. So it's built successfully. Now let's open this. Yep, perfect. So we are getting, as of now in our database we have two data, and in our Redis we have Redis data. So everything is working fine as expected, right? Now quickly we will rebuild our this ng application and run inside our Docker Compose. Okay, right? So now let's build it in our this terminal. So here this is for Docker. So here we are going to build our Angular app only. Okay, so how we can do that? Docker Compose build only ng app. Okay, because our service name is ng app. Here we have to just give service name. So now what will happen? Ng app is going to be build only. Okay, so now see, ng app is getting built. So it may take some time. Please bear with me. Now third step is in progress, which is copy step. So it's copying the entire data from local to user source app, that is a container directory, right? And now it's installing our Angular CLI, which would not be needed in our production, but in our dev environment we are just installing to execute our Angular application. Now it's running npm install, and now it's exporting to the image, right? So it should be completed very soon. Yep, absolutely fine. So our image got built. Now we have to run as a container, run our command as a docker compose up -d. So it's going to run only our Angular application. You can see here, see all other applications are running, only it's recreating to the ng app, and now it's getting started. So as of now it's starting, so it should be in the status of started. Yeah, now it's started, right? So now let's see in our, yeah, great. You can see here our ng app is started. Now let's see, it's running now. Great. This is our great achievement, right? Now our application is running inside our Docker, and which is fetching the data from our Node API, and Node API is connecting to our MongoDB database and Redis database. Okay, so this data is coming from the Redis and these two data is coming from the Mongo database. Now let me quickly add one more here data as in here. Let me add one more. It was Mongo save, right? It was MongoDB save, right? So now let me refresh. So it should be, see here, it's generating the ID every time, unique ID. Now we can refresh our Angular application. We should be seeing here multiple data, right? So see here, now we are seeing the multiple data. Great. So now our whole effort is fruitful. Everything is working as expected, and inside our Docker, all the services are up and running, right? Now let's see what all the things that we have covered so far. So we understood about what is the Docker Compose. Then after that, we learned how to install our Docker Compose. And also we have learned about how to write our Docker Compose YAML file, and how we can define our services, and how we can define our networks, how we can define our volumes, right? And we have seen like how we can run our multiple services inside a Docker Compose, right? Now we are pending with Docker Compose commands and debugging containers. So this is 1 hour straight video for now. So I'll make another video right after this, and I will cover that Docker Compose command in detail and how to debug containers. So that's comes to the end of this video. And friend, this is a humble request to all of you. If you have not subscribed this channel, please subscribe it and press the bell icon so you'll get the notification of all of my upcoming videos. And please do like, share to the people who really need it. Your each and every subscription, like and share gives me a lot of confidence to make the quality videos for you, right? So that's all for the day. I'll see you in my next video. Till then, take care and keep learning.